The Henschel 33 medium truck was one of the main trucks of the German Wehrmacht during the Second World War. The early trucks were initially manufactured for the Reichswehr starting in 1928. The more well-known and improved version came out in 1934 and would be produced until 1943. These 6x4 trucks were powered by a 100 horsepower petrol engine, although a 100 horsepower diesel engine would also be introduced around 1937. They had a payload of around 3 tons and a top speed of roughly 55 kilometers per hour. During the mid to late 30s, a number of Henschel 33s would also find their way into the Chinese military. These vehicles would be used for a very specific role, which this video will examine. However, it is important to note that as there's little proper documentation available on the Henschel 33s in Chinese service, the information presented may not be 100% accurate, and at times does include some of my personal speculations, which I've tried to make as obvious as possible and to back up with supporting evidence. The Chinese Henschel 33s were closely tied to China's importation of modern artillery pieces from Germany. Up until the mid-1930s, the Chinese military possessed mostly horse-drawn, light artillery. The need for heavier, motorized howitzers was recognized, and in May of 1934, the Chinese would place an order for 24 Rheinmetall 15cm L32 howitzers, a unique variant of the German schwere Feldhaubitze 18, also known as the SFH 18s or Heavy Field Howitzer 18s. This would be followed by an additional order of 24 standard SFH 18s roughly 2 years later. Around the same time, an order for 60 10.5cm leichte Feldhaubitze 18 or Light Field Howitzer 18s would also be placed, although some sources suggest that only about 40 of the light field howitzers would arrive. These modern artillery pieces would be used to form China's first fully motorized artillery units, the 10th, 11th, 13th, and 14th Independent Artillery Regiments, under the direct command of General Headquarters. As these were to be motorized units, the search for a suitable prime mover would begin soon after the 1934 order for the 24 15cm howitzers was placed. Chiang Kai-shek decided to put Yu Dawei, the director of the Ordnance Administration Office, in charge of this. The original plan was to purchase the vehicles from either Vickers or Krupp, something that the Chinese had done with the Bofors 75mm M1929 anti-aircraft guns. However, seeing as how the Vickers Dragons performed relatively poorly, Yu Dawei decided to go to the Germans for advice, as they were much more knowledgeable in this matter. The Germans introduced a number of suitable vehicles and recommended that the Chinese should use either the 3-ton Henschel or Bussing vehicles as the prime movers for the 15cm howitzers, while also introducing a 1-ton Krupp vehicle, likely the Krupp Protze, to carry the ammunition. The Chinese Commercial Office representative in Berlin, Tan Bo-yu, was given a tour of the different vehicles, and after reviewing the prices of each, he pointed out that the Henschel vehicle was the obvious choice for towing the howitzers. Not only was it similar in performance to the Bussing one, it was more than 4 times cheaper, with each vehicle costing 13,750 Reichsmarks, compared to the 56,000 Reichsmarks price tag on the Bussing vehicles. However, the Germans soon realized that there had been a miscommunication and clarified that the price estimate of 56,000 wasn't for the 3-ton wheeled vehicle, but was instead for the Bussing 5-ton medium half-track, which would later be known as the SDKFZ-6. At the time, the earlier model of the half-track, the BNL-5, had just entered serial production and was likely the type that the Germans recommended. A demonstration in Germany showing what the half-tracks were capable of thoroughly impressed the Chinese officials, and eventually, the SDKFZ-6 was chosen as the standard prime mover for the 15cm howitzers. Records showed that at least one of the half-tracks arrived in China with the very first batch of guns, although for reasons still not entirely clear, it was decided afterwards that the SDKFZ-6 was unsuitable for towing the artillery pieces in China. Price was likely a factor in this decision, as well as the fact that these vehicles were quite complicated to maintain and may have been unsuitable for the road conditions in China, a problem that other German vehicles such as the Panzer Is also encountered. In the end, the Chinese government settled on the other vehicle, the Henschel 33 medium truck, to be the prime mover for the 15cm howitzers. Although they were also considered to be too heavy, they were much cheaper than the half-tracks and much easier to maintain. Most importantly, despite being slightly underpowered, they were still capable of towing the 15cm howitzers. When orders were placed for the 10.5cm light field howitzers, the Henschel 33 would be chosen to be their prime movers as well. Sources differ on which model of the Henschel 33 was purchased. The 33D1, which ran on petrol, or the 33G1, which was a diesel version. At a glance, it seems unlikely that the Diesel 33G1 was the vehicle sent to China as it entered serial production for the Wehrmacht in 1937, 2 to 3 years after the Chinese began their search for a prime mover. Furthermore, the Wehrmacht vehicles were identifiable by the word diesel on the radiator grille, something which is absent on Chinese vehicles, as can be seen through this footage here. However, a possible explanation for this would be that the Chinese vehicles were pre-production models of the Diesel 33G1, manufactured before serial production began for the Wehrmacht. This wouldn't be the first time that the Germans sent prototypes or unique variants of weapons and equipment over to China, and there are many other examples of this happening. This theory is also supported by a report written by U.S. Brigadier General Jerome Waters, who inspected the Chinese 10th Artillery Regiment in 1943. In his report, he specifically mentioned the prime movers for the 15cm howitzers, describing them as Henschel diesel heavy trucks. At the end of the day, however, it cannot be said for certain exactly which vehicle model the Chinese purchased, as documentation is somewhat lacking. Regardless of whether the Henschel 33s were of the D1 or G1 variant, these two vehicles were nearly identical in terms of performance, with the main difference being in the type of fuel used. The total number of Henschel 33s purchased by China is not known, but was likely similar to, if not slightly more than the number of 10.5 and 15cm howitzers purchased. At least some of the Henschels appear to have been painted in the German three-tone camouflage pattern, which was standard for all German vehicles until 1937. Other vehicles may have had the later two-tone camouflage pattern as well, as Germany took quite a while to deliver the weapons and equipment, with some of them arriving in China as late as 1938. By this point, the Wehrmacht had already switched over to the later two-tone camouflage pattern, and as a result, it's possible that some of the later vehicles were painted in this newer pattern. However, it's extremely difficult to tell based off the limited photos and footage available, all of which are in black and white. Some photos even seem to suggest that a few of the Henschels were painted in one solid color, though this may have been due to the vehicles being dirty or the paint being worn. The Chinese also added their own camouflage to these vehicles in the form of trees and branches, likely to avoid detection by Japanese aircraft which ruled the skies above China for most of the war. Evidence suggests that at least 3 different variants of the Henschel 33s were imported into China, with the first being the truck variant. These trucks had a cab in the front with a folding roof as well as a bed in the rear. However, these vehicles also contained a few interesting features that set it apart from the standard trucks used by the Germans. Photos show that on the Chinese vehicles, storage compartments were added to the rear, replacing the tailgates. Access to the bed of the truck appears to have been moved to the front through 2 doors located on the left and right sides. There may have also been benches within the bed for the crew to sit on, though this space was often used for equipment as well. These trucks were commonly seen towing the 10.5cm light field howitzers, although as the war progressed, they would become increasingly common in the 15cm heavy field howitzer units as well. The Chinese also had an artillery tractor variant of the Henschel 33, mainly seen towing the 15cm howitzers. Although the Chinese eventually rejected the SDKFZ-6 half-track, it seems that they still liked many of its features, since it was designed specifically for the role of towing equipment and artillery pieces, unlike the Henschel 33 truck, which was more of a general-purpose vehicle. As a result, for the Chinese contract, it was decided to essentially combine the two by placing the body of the SDKFZ-6 onto the chassis of the Henschel 33. The vehicle body would contain features from both the engineer variant of the SDKFZ-6 as well as the artillery variant known as the SDKFZ-6/1. The vehicle had 4 rows of bench seats like the engineer half-track, but also featured a rear storage compartment similar to the SDKFZ-6/1, which was usually used for storing ammunition. A folding canvas roof was also present and could cover the entire body of the vehicle. A few minor differences in detail have been observed among the artillery tractors, such as different tire tread patterns, as well as what appears to be an opening on the left side of some of the vehicles. The Henschel 33 artillery tractor would be produced solely for the Chinese contract, and there is no evidence to suggest that they were ever used by the Wehrmacht. The third Henschel 33 variant was the artillery observation variant, which was likely related to the German KFZ-76 observation vehicle and was used to observe and direct artillery fire. In Germany, the development of the KFZ-76, as well as the extremely similar KFZ-77 telephone motor vehicle, initially commenced on the chassis of medium cross-country trucks like the Krupp L3H63. However, for serial production, it was decided to switch to light trucks like the Bussing G31 and the Mercedes-Benz G3A. For the Chinese, though, the observation vehicles were built on the chassis of the Henschel 33. These vehicles, like the German KFZ-76, had closed sides with doors in both the front and the rear. Also, like the KFZ-76, there were 2 rows of benches at the back, one on either side, with the occupants seated facing each other and perpendicular to the direction of travel. A folding canvas roof was present as well. The Henschel 33 observation vehicles also carried 2 spare tires at the front, which is another feature that sets it apart from the other variants. The Chinese would also use these observation vehicles as standard prime movers, and most of the photos and footage available shows them towing the 15cm howitzers. It appears that this variant of the Henschel 33 was unique to the Chinese forces as well, being manufactured solely for the Chinese contract. As the war progressed, the number of Henschel vehicles in Chinese service began to decrease. With the Sino-German cooperation effectively ending in 1938, no more vehicles or spare parts were able to enter the country. Some of the Henschel 33s would be destroyed or captured by the Japanese, while others were lost due to accidents or through wear and tear after years of hard use. Following America's entry into the war, large amounts of US military equipment began to arrive in China. Towards the end of the war, many of the German howitzers would be replaced by American ones like the 105mm M2A1s, towed by the CCKW 2.5-ton trucks. Still, many of the Henschel 33s served all the way up until the end of World War II, with some of them enduring over 9 years of use, a testament to their durability and reliability.